How is everybody doing? I can't see the time. Oh, there we go. There's the time. All right, so we are doing another episode of Miguel Trujillo Speaks for 25 minutes. And here I go. Here I go. So let's see, what's going on with me today? So I'm reading an interesting book. I think it's a book about food addiction. And it's written by a scientist who is a brain scientist. I guess he's a neurologist of some kind, perhaps. I need to learn more about his background, but he's a PhD in something or other related to brain science. And he's mainly talking about the brain. And one point that he brought out in his book is that addiction is nothing more than very strong reinforcement. And I really appreciate that. And he talked a lot about dopamine, how that's the learning chemical, and how dopamine can reinforce our behaviors, and how it reinforces our decision making. And he talked a lot about decision making in the basal ganglia of our brains. And so I've been appreciating his descriptions about how people make decisions and how they use cues from their environment, and how those cues, those external cues and internal cues, right, the thoughts that we think impact when dopamine is used to reinforce certain behaviors and to strengthen certain behaviors. Not just motivations, but cognitions and motor behaviors. So that's pretty cool. I'm excited about that. Pretty neat to sort of, and I particularly like the conversation we're having, or he's having, as it relates to food. Because I have an interest in psychology myself, and I'm quite interested. I've actually never really been strongly interested in questions related to addiction, but I've been trying to explain some of my own behaviors when it comes to craving food and overeating. I mean, I'm not obese. I'm definitely in the normal BMI, actually below normal BMI. Of course, I exercise regularly. I go on these walks, for example. When I went to the gym today, I might even spend some time talking about my efforts at the gym, which were pretty good today, because today was leg day. But anyway, I have been interested in seeking out explanations relating to how I manage food. I want to do it in a better way. In the past, like I've probably described, I've used calorie counting, which was a very effective method for me, but I hope to use other methods as well. I don't know if I've told you, but I've been using like a Weight Watchers point counting technique these days, but it's not the Weight Watchers technique. It's my own personal technique based on many years of calorie counting, and I try to eat 5 points a meal. Now, these are my points, not Weight Watchers points. I know very little about the Weight Watchers method, but I've got my own method that I use for every meal. Actually, I've been using it less often in the last few weeks. And so anyway, I've also been intrigued about how questions related to sort of the stay-at-home order here, and I've been noticing that it's quite a lot easier to gain weight because I'm not out and about the town doing all kinds of stuff. I'm sort of at home most of the time, and so that means I'm also near my kitchen most of the time. So I'm trying to come up with strategies, personal strategies for my space and how I use it to manage my weight. It's interesting how weight management is like a full-time job. It's not. And I think it has to do with our food environment. Back then, 100 years ago, 500 years ago, 10,000 years ago, food, first of all, didn't taste as good as it does today. That's for sure. Today's food is amazing. It blows my mind every time I taste it. And let's see what else. Also, of course, we're sedentary, more sedentary than we've ever been. In the past, living life was, to people, was all they needed to, was all the exercise they needed to do, right? Because it takes a lot of energy to hunt down white-tailed deer or brontosauruses, and not brontosauruses, I'm sorry. I meant mammoths. And so, yeah, it definitely, with food tasting so good, and the need to exercise at such a low rate, I mean, really everyone has to be focused on managing their nutrition. There's just no way around it. And I get, benefits from managing my nutrition as it relates to increasing more exercise by going on walks and bicycling and weightlifting and all that, being more active and stuff like that. But all that effort is countered by the stay-at-home order because of COVID and things like this. So it's really, really quite challenging. It's not easy. It's not an easy game to play, because you almost have to make an excuse to get out and do some exercise these days. There's no natural exercise other than perhaps preparing food in the kitchen, through cooking and cleanup, and also doing laundry and just cleaning up our own home. There's not much exercise that people really need to do these days. So there's the exercise piece, and then there's the eating piece. The nutrition, choosing foods that, are healthy and don't have so many calories in them, so I can maintain weight. So it's a challenge. I think I have a feeling that obesity is going to skyrocket once the data scientists get together, and they, once this COVID thing is over. I think they're probably going to have some amazing numbers that describe huge weight gain on the part of the, maybe even the global population, because of the changes that we've been experiencing in terms of, limiting our daily activities. We're just burning fewer calories, I think, as a whole. Now, thankfully, I've been able to find gyms or find ways to work out. I've downloaded this program called Freeletics, which is, I really do have a strong intention to use it and to exercise regularly. And anyway, we'll see if I can get that started up. I guess I need to get the dopamine flowing and start reinforcing some behavior related to, body weight exercise. Of course, in order to reinforce that behavior, I've got to actually do it once. Create a habit. And so anyway, so that's what's on my mind. And so anyway, yeah, I've been reading this book, and it's really quite interesting. There was one example that the author had that I thought was pretty interesting as it relates to processed food. But before I say that example, I'm going to talk about an experiment that he related, having to do with rats, or maybe mice, probably mice. And or maybe it's probably rats now that I think about it. But the author related this story about rats. There was a clinical study where rats were choosing between purple and red juice, right? Purple and red drink. And the rats, at the time when they first tested them, didn't have any preference, one greater than the other, for the purple or red drinks. So the scientists, I don't know how they did it, but I think what they did is they maybe they put tubes down their stomachs and they injected starch into the rats' stomachs when the rats were drinking the grape drink and not the red drink. And what happened is that they found that the rats started preferring the grape drink, the drink that offered the extra calories. And what's interesting about that is that the rats, of course, didn't know. They did not know when the scientists were putting the starch solution into their stomachs. And so the scientists got to know about this reinforcing reaction that was going on simply because the grape drink, or the purple drink, had additional calories in the stomach as a result of this starch solution. And they tracked it down into there's some kind of sensor in the small intestine, where the small intestine meets the stomach. Apparently there's some kind of calorie detector there. And they discovered, upon further testing, that this calorie detector in the stomach, or just beyond the stomach in the small intestine, sensed not just carbohydrate calories, but also fat calories and protein calories. You can imagine that. So the sensor was that good at sensing calories, and they developed a theory about how when that sensor goes off, it reinforces behaviors relating that are sort of surrounding that when the calories hit the small intestine. And I don't know, I just find this extremely fascinating, because what it means is that your body is seeking out calories all the time. And that's why Brussels sprouts are not as reinforcing a food as, say, a chocolate sundae or a chocolate bar. It's that the human body is literally reinforcing high-calorie food intake, which is pretty amazing. And so that's the clinical story that I wanted to relate. And so now I want to talk about an example they described relating to that very phenomenon, and as it relates to processing food. So he told a story about the coca plant, which is a plant. It's got a stimulant in it, a mild stimulant that they chew in South America. And it gives sort of a moderate high, very moderate really, I think, and it has an effect very similar to caffeine. But of course, he also mentioned that that coca plant, when you process it even further using scientific equipment, that coca plant can turn into the very addictive drug cocaine. And then, in addition to that, there are ways to process cocaine to make it even more addictive. I think it's called freebasing, I'm not sure. But cocaine could be turned into crack cocaine, which is even more addictive, which is even more reinforcing. And so this is fascinating to me, because it is really a perfect example of how processing foods, that is by concentrating the calories, carbohydrate, fat, and protein, can have reinforcing effects on the food, on people who eat the food, and how processing plays a role in that. And a really good example is chocolate, for example. Chocolate is a processed food, and the powder itself is actually quite bitter. But nobody eats, well, maybe very few people eat just the raw cocoa nibs, I guess. I'm sure people eat cocoa nibs, but a lot of the time the cocoa is powdered, and then uh, so the all the and then there are things added like sugar and milk and other things to help um, cancel out all the bitter notes of the cocoa powder, and so it becomes highly caloric. There are also other chemicals like theobromine, or is that what it is? Theobromine? Theobromine? I forget what the actual chemical is, but though that's also slightly addictive, and so it's a very calorie-laden um, processed food. Chocolate is, and there's also additional addictive characteristics to it, and it's highly reinforcing. And there are people who maybe jokingly, and maybe some unjokingly, not jokingly, claim to have some sort of addiction, cravings relating to chocolate. And here's the thing, I do too. I'm human, and I appreciate a good chocolate bar, a chocolate snack, chocolate candy. And it's just really fascinating to me. And there was also another story that he related, talking about rats and stimulation of certain brain areas that increased the dopamine in the rat's brain, and how he was talking about sort of the difference between reinforcement and addiction. Reinforcement is a kind of sort of addition to sort of some behavior. It's sort of it's a motivating factor to perform a behavior. And if it takes place in, say, with unprocessed food, which I'm just using as an example, it's only the reinforcement is moderate, and it doesn't sort of take over one's life. But when you sort of think about these processed foods, the reinforcing is less moderate. In fact, the reinforcing can be extreme. My girlfriend and I were watching some movies these movies about musicians, many of them who had like drug and alcohol addiction problems, and eventually died from their problems there with the drug addiction. What this is just, this is reinforcement, that's sort of excessive behavioral reinforcement that sort of takes over all other it's basically it's sort of out of the league of reasonable reinforcement, so that you end up not talking to your friends, or maybe not eating regular nutritious food. You end up ignoring other things, other parts of your life. In fact, now that I think about it, video games, there are some video games that are like, these multi-user dungeons and stuff. I know that a lot of people, it really triggers their dopamine. A lot of people are pretty sensitive to it. I know I was as a kid, in fact. And I would, any spare moment I had, I really enjoyed the ability to play video games, because it was so reinforcing. And anyway, eventually I had to stop playing video games because I just didn't have the time. It takes a lot of time, at least for me, it took a lot of time. And, but anyway, it just really struck me about how, and actually, when regular everyday stimulus about, eating and drinking and being with friends and family, when that stimulus is overridden by, addictive behaviors, that can be a problem. You can end up hurting yourself. So anyway, I just was interested in that subject, and I'm glad, I'm getting sense of what's going on here. Well, anyway, let's see. So what's been going on with me? What else has been going on? Let's see. So anyway, I want to continue talking about this subject. So this is what it's... I've started thinking a little bit about unhealthy behaviors as it relates to eating. Now, here's the thing. I've been obese before, and I'm not obese now, and thankfully I had calorie counting to take me out of it, but I have been sort of looking at the past, some pictures, some old Google Photos pictures, and I think I have a sense of this idea that I was just really eating a lot of very palatable foods. And when I was obese, I keep asking myself, well, what was it that drove me to obesity? Because I was eating a lot more food than I needed to eat, that's for sure. And I guess what I'd like to do is I'd like to make sure that doesn't happen again. And I just want to get smart about it. I want to start changing my food environment to reduce the likelihood of that happening. And I think what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to probably eat more whole foods, plant-based. So there was a while that I was vegan, and I appreciated that. Sort of moved away a little bit from that. Regrettably, I still, for me, I think my heart is with veganism, but every once in a while, well, here's the thing. Every once in a while, I like to have salmon with my girlfriend and shrimp as well. And also, every once in a while, I like to have a little bit of cheese and butter. And I also have been, because of my weightlifting, I've been wanting to increase my protein intake by using whey protein, because it's so easy. It's so easy. I can't believe how easy it is to get 40 grams of protein if I want, or have a total of 80 grams of protein in a day. That's actually not a difficult thing for me to do now. And supplements can help me with that. But anyway, getting back to the whole foods plant-based idea, I think what I want to do is I want to start eating foods that reinforce that don't reinforce any negative addictive behaviors, and don't create cravings. And really, also what that means is eating less chocolate, right? Much less. It also means thinking about. Remember, it means creating an environment that's free from cues, both external and internal, that will get me to eat food. Because here's the thing. I already have built up a collection of behaviors that I really enjoy and appreciate. And, that's based on a lot of past experiences. And it's really those experiences which, might have reinforced some poor behavior in terms of eating frequency or eating amount. So anyway, I'm going to start changing things up. I used to really be into eating Splenda sweetener, but I think I've actually sort of pushed that bag into the back of my cabinet, because I think I want to eat a whole lot less of it, if any at all. And the same goes true with other, say, artificial sweetened beverages. Like I used to eat a lot of artificially sweetened powdered instant tea, and I think I'm just going to start drinking water. I know, but all of this is in a bid to reduce the risk of me becoming obese, or even just overweight, honestly. And so anyway, I think the more I can focus on enjoying fruits and vegetables and grains in their unprocessed forms, the better off I'm going to be. And the greater the sort of the less risk I'll have toward being obese. Of course, what that means is that I'm going to be cutting out some what I'd call highly caloric foods. And I'll also be cutting out a lot of satisfying processed foods. But I think it's just something that has to happen. And I'm not. It's not for me a fervent necessity, but it's something I want to do because I want to try to preserve my health and I want to make maintaining my weight as easy as possible. Talk to you later. Bye bye.